what really shocked me today is, yeah, the dominance was there. They had a ton of possession. They passed the ball around the box a lot. But there's two things that stood out to me. And both are things that we've discussed before, and we actually praised Bayern Munich and the way they've been playing in recent weeks because, it's been phenomenal. This was sort of a step back to long lost thought days, where the defense was way too easy to counter, way too easy to beat with speed. It was also a day where, again, another day where they very much relied too much on Jamal Musiala getting it done. And, he had the most dangerous opportunity. Him and Leroy Sané hit the post. So Musiala saw a header turned over the crossbar by the Feyenoord goalkeeper. But there was no Harry Kane. Again, if Bayern Munich don't get a penalty, Harry Kane might not be on this pitch at all. And I think, these two things slowly but surely are becoming an issue because as good as Feyenoord were and as efficient as they were in their attack, the amount of dominance and the chance creation that Bayern Munich had, they should have scored today.
Yeah, it was a really interesting match in that regard. I mean, first and foremost, I think Bayern probably underestimated Feyenoord. I think they underestimated Jimenez, as I did. I tweeted, or not tweeted, I blue skied or whatever you say. I posted on Blue Sky before the game. I was like, look, Feyenoord, perhaps last time I watched them, they were absolutely dreadful against Bayer Leverkusen. This should be a pretty straightforward win for Bayern Munich, and obviously I was made to eat my words, as I'm sure Bayern Munich were as well. It should have been a routine win for them. I know Feyenoord's ground is by no means an easy place to go. The game was delayed in the first kind of 10 minutes because the huge amount of smoke coming from, the pyrotechnics and the flares and things from the home fans who were loud throughout the match. So it was an intimidating atmosphere, but I don't think that was really an excuse. And to be honest, I don't really want to take away from Feyenoord because I think they played very well. I thought they were very efficient with their chances. They took their chances. They did a great job of that. But it was a game that Bayern lost rather than Feyenoord won, if you know what I mean, in the sense that, you look at that defence, Kim for that first goal. We've seen this happen time and time again. It's the kind of downside to the Upamecano-Kim partnership that these guys can be so pragmatic, they can be so physical, they can be so on top of things, but then they just have these moments where they're almost too invested in kind of, almost kind of intercepting the ball, and they get caught out, and both of them have now been caught out multiple times in the Champions League this season, particularly the Champions League. They have had issues in the Bundesliga as well, but we've seen them kind of settle into a rhythm in the Bundesliga last couple of months. Everyone thought, wow, these guys have formed a really good partnership. Upamecano and Kim are the kind of future for Bayern Munich defence. They've kind of put their demons behind them, and then Champions League theme song starts ringing through the stadium, and suddenly these guys get jittered all over again. And it must be a huge frustration for Kompany because the way that he's transformed those two players has been one of his biggest credits this season, I would say. The way we've got Upamecano looking like a top-class defender and Kim as well. And then they still have these hiccups. I thought Kim was, obviously all over the place for that first goal. And then another defensive lapse just for half-time. Alphonso Davies goes off injured. Guerrero comes on, knocks a player over in the box, and then Jimenez makes it 2 before half-time. So you have those two, as we would call, like in tennis, like unforced errors, where Bayern more or less just gifted Jimenez particularly, but Feyenoord 2 goals. And then, as you said, up front, they have unforced errors as well, where Harry Kane just can't find the back of the net. He's not moving. He's not mobile. He's not linking up with players. And, it's such a fascinating thing. This has happened to Kane a few times in his career where he picks up an injury or he has that kind of notorious ankle which is made of glass. And if things just aren't going quite right for him, he does have these moments where, he goes through these really rough patches of form. But I think the problem with that is that because Kane is heralded as one of these strikers who had a little bit more to him, we've compared him to Lewandowski in the last couple of weeks, and you'd say, Lewandowski is a clear penalty box striker. He wants Coman, Gnabry, Sané. He wants these guys to be flinging crosses into the box all day long for him to take advantage of, whereas Harry Kane wants to drop deep, he wants to play as a number 10, he wants to take the free kicks, he wants to hit the crosses, he wants to take the corners. He used to takes corners for England, for goodness sake. He's supposed to have all these extra strings to his bow, but when he's not quite 100%, he's not doing any of those things. and he can't fall back on just being this clinical, bona fide number 9. For example, if Lewandowski is 80% fit, you can still sit him in the box and you'll still create chances, you still finish chances, because that's what his job is. Whereas with Kane, when he kind of drops off a bit, he suddenly isn't really good at anything, and it does seem to be a huge hindrance for Bayern Munich. He's now got one non-penalty goal in his last 12 games for Bayern Munich, again, in all competitions. As you kind of mentioned, he only seems to be scoring from the penalty spot recently. And I think it's a huge problem for Bayern Munich because he's not getting any younger. He has to play because of his transfer fee and his wages. But you can see that he is currently holding Bayern back. And when you couple that back with alongside someone like Jamal Musiala, who's obviously still recovering from his illness, he's still trying to get back to full fitness, he's not quite sharp. And it's a problem. And it's a problem that obviously Vincent Kompany doesn't know how to address, because he won't drop Kane. Doesn't really have anyone that can step in for Musiala. I mean, certainly isn't going to drop Musiala for this game tonight either. So it meant Bayern basically had to play with 1.5 players missing tonight. And as you said, we clearly showed in the final third.
I wonder if this will rekindle the interest in Nkunku, this result today. Because it does show that at times, as the game progressed, the company added Gnabry, and he didn't do much. Sané came on, he hits the post. And as the game progresses, you wonder, well, Musiala and Kane are not doing it. Where is this goal going to come from, right? Like, where's the first one going to come from?
Goretzka, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, but even he, he had to drop back into the centre back position when Pavlovic came on, and in fairness, I do think this midfield looks better with Pavlovic on it. But even then, it's just, yeah, I mean, that's how the third goal happens, right? Because that backline is just a catastrophe at this stage, and Guerrero is involved again. Plays on, forgot the goal scorer, but he plays him on, and that's the other thing too. Like, Alphonso Davies has been very good for Bayern Munich and earned himself this new contract that Max Eberl essentially confirmed at the I think it was halftime, where he said that that's now done. And he comes off, and it's such an enormous drop, isn't it? In that back line, and that is I think something that they need to address. And if Alphonso Davies, if he goes off with a hamstring, which looks like a suspected hamstring injury, then who knows how long he's going to be out with that, right? Because that's 80% of his game, isn't it? Using his hamstring and using that speed, and if he doesn't have that, there's no point playing him. And that is a couple places for concerns. Like, I think when this Bayern Munich team has all of their best 11 players on the field, when they're all in tune, when they're all fit and they all play well, they are one of the best teams in Europe. But right now, it feels like if you add a couple pieces off the bench here and there, whether it's Guerrero, you addressed Lima in the past, Gnabry is, I don't know what he's doing these days, but he doesn't look like a player that can help. Then the drop off is significant, and you add to that a couple players from that first 11, if they're not 100%, Kane, Musiala, it's just, it feels like it can still get out of tune really quickly. And you know how it is at Bayern Munich, when they lose one game, it usually comes in bunches, right? And it's not like that they're, in years past, at this point of the season, they would be like 10 points ahead of the next competitor in the Bundesliga, and that team would be Borussia Dortmund, and even if they would have like a hint of getting closer, they would drop points somewhere else. Now their competitor in the Bundesliga is Bayer Leverkusen, who don't seem to go away anytime soon, right? So like, they're not in a position where they can drop points. That can make you better down the stretch, right? There's an argument to be made that if you chased, you're actually better. But right now, all of it still seems a little fragile. And I mean, I do want to stress, I do think Vincent Kompany has fixed a lot of these issues, but you can tell that he's kind of operating on an open heart, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's also operating with a squad that's very much in flux. It's a team in transition. It's also a team, I think, that still needs a lot of new investment. You can certainly praise Vincent Kompany for the work he's done with the players he's got, but if you want to be a little cynical, you could say, he wasn't Bayern's first choice. He was obviously desperate to get the job. And, we've made this criticism of Nuri Sahin at Dortmund this season, but he more or less arrives at Bayern thankful just to be offered the job and to be in the running. So he's not exactly going to turn around and say, I'm only taking this job if you get me a right back. I'm only taking this job if you find me a replacement for Goretzka. I'm only taking this job if you spend 40 million euros on the second striker for me, because I know Harry Kane will get injured at some point this season. But that's what Bayern need. They need, you're right, they need a backup striker. They need to figure out what's going on with those white players, whether it's Sané, Coman, and Gnabry. You could feasibly see all three, if Bayern were being ruthless enough, they could feasibly see all three of them leaving this summer, because none of them are really living up to scratch right now. And that's where you're right, someone like Christopher Nkunku would make a huge difference.
Yeah.
I think Bayern, if they did try to sign this month, they'd pay through the nose for it. I think Chelsea would really demand a huge fee for him. But he might be exactly what they need, because he answered a few of the problems there. But yeah, there's problems in this team, you're right. It's interesting, on the last show, the bonus show we did before this one, so on Tuesday night, we talked about, obviously, Tom Bischoff joining the club, and we talked about the emergence of Leon Goretzka. And, it's well and good to praise him for what he's done, but I think that actually almost kind of masked some poor performances against Wolfsburg. If it wasn't for his goals and his performance, I think Bayern probably would have dropped points against Wolfsburg in that game, just for the attacking talent that Wolfsburg had on the pitch. And it'll be really interesting to see how they kind of navigate this kind of really tricky period where they've got games coming thick and fast. They got another Champions League game next week. And as you said, Company doesn't really have that squad depth to fall back on. One of our listeners actually mentioned, was chatting to him on Blue Sky during the game, and she was saying that she'd really wish he'd started Thomas Müller from this match. And I can see why. It's a game in which it's a crowded box. Müller's obviously got that ability to find space. He can play 1-2s with people. But the fact that it's Thomas Müller that she's mentioning as a potential plan B for Bayern Munich, if not Gnabry, if not Coman or whoever else, or Leroy Sané, none of these players are very inspiring. I know I don't want to be too harsh on Thomas Müller. I know he's a club legend, and Company and Sané deserve their dues as well. And Gnabry, but none of those players are going to come on and completely change a match quite like they used to do. And yeah, that's a huge problem for Bayern. Not to mention the fact that the guy who came on for Alphonso Davies, Guerrero, was pretty well documented as not being good enough for Borussia Dortmund. A player that Borussia Dortmund let go of because they didn't feel like he was worthy of a starting role in their team. So you're right, if Davies is out for an extended period of time and Guerrero has to fill in at left back. I know he's done a decent job this season, and I know Company quite likes playing in the right side, and he's okay, but gosh, against the very best teams, I'd be really worried about him playing left back for an extended period of time. So yeah, it's a very, very tricky period for Bayern right now, and I think Feyenoord and the Champions League as a whole has maybe done a good job of highlighting some of the issues of this squad.